we managed to calm things down, and we got about as close as I planned to get to that part of hippos before laying out my strategy for how we were going to get past safely. And I led the way, telling everyone to follow me close by. And I got to this narrow channel that would give us a nice little side route past the hippos. And I turned to check that everyone was where they were supposed to be, and sure enough, one of the canoes was right behind me. Mac in his little kayak was right next to him. And the one boat, though, had fallen back a bit. So to give him a chance to catch up, I just set my paddle down and we drifted. I mean, everyone was just sitting there. I remember they were sipping on their drinks and just resting and soaking in the peace and the tranquility that comes with that late afternoon glow. And life was pretty good. And then it was just this sickening So I turned around just in time to see this hippo striking a canoe, the guide in the back flying out of the boat into the river. And it was kind of surreal. The canoe tottered on the shoulders of the hippo for a while before slapping back into the water. I'd been guiding for quite a few years, and this wasn't my first hippo attack. So my mind went to crisis mode, and I knew that I needed to get everyone to safety. So paddled towards Evans. He was the guide who was in the river. And, hang in there, I'm coming to get you. Told Ben, one of the other guides, to rescue the clients. Pulled up next to Evans, the chap in the water, and leant over to grab a hold of his outstretched hand. He was reaching up to me to try to grab onto me. And as our fingers almost touched, the water between us just erupted. My whole world went dark and strangely quiet. A few very long seconds ticked by as I tried to figure out what was going on. You see, from my waist up, I wasn't dry, but I wasn't wet either. Not like my legs were. And there was this incredible pressure crushing down on my lower back. I struggled to break free. It was a pretty pathetic attempt at first, with my arms pinned to my sides and my legs flailing about in the water, but somehow I managed to get one hand free, and feeling around, I felt the bristles on Hippo's snout. No. At least now I knew where I was. I was head first up to my waist on the hippo's throat.
Nobody turns off the radio. So that idea that we had, that kernel of an idea that you don't turn the radio off until you know if the hero lives or dies. Well, the obvious problem is that, of course, you know the hero lives because he's talking to you. So
if he dies, it's not such a great story.
It's not such a great story. But we did end up finding that the kernel really was simply that no one turns the dial. That's really what we wanted to make, was a show where maybe it's not life or death, but something is at stake. And if something is at stake and it's deeply personally important for that person, in this case, his life was deeply personally important to him, it's really hard to turn the dial. So that's what we came to find. Don't add more.
Yeah, so, but just to pick up on that, it wasn't, not all of our stories were life and death struggles in any way. I mean, there were stories about people who, were struggling with trying to, get back their South African accent, or I don't know, I can't remember some of the other. Mm-hmm. But seemingly small things, but just that it had to seem like something big was at stake to them, so we could turn a hippo story into something that was seemingly sort of mundane on the surface, but was actually big at the time to somebody, and that was it. But what was,
Yeah, I mean, we ended up having stories where the stakes were, there were a couple of stories where there were actually memories of someone's childhood and something that really scared them, a dream that was reoccurring, that kind of thing, where the stakes are really small from our perspective, but in their telling, and in thinking about what things were like from their personal point of view. The stakes were huge, and we tried to make it really evident to the audience that's going on. I'm thinking of other examples, but I can't think right now. No.
Guy gets into a fishing accident, loses his leg, decides that it's the fish's fault, goes mad with desire for revenge. He gets himself a boat, a crew, sets off into the sea. Most of the sailors that are with him don't suspect the danger that awaits them, that they're actually hunting the great white whale. This, more or less, is the story of Moby Dick, Captain Ahab's ultimately self-destructive quest to seek revenge on the whale who took his leg. And if you're familiar with the novel, you know that Ishmael, our hero, is just kind of along for the ride. He didn't mean for this to happen to him. In fact, the whole thing really doesn't have a lot to do with him. And that's the theme of both of our stories this week. What do you do when you're just along for the ride and something else or someone else changes the course of your life forever? I'm Andrew Kaufman. This is Live Through This. And what you're about to hear is not a story about politics or religion or geopolitical conflict. It's not even about heroes and villains. It is, however, about two guys and a tragedy. And it's set in Israel.
So I rented a car in Jerusalem, and it was a winter day, and I knew where I was driving. I was driving to a town called Kfar Kara.
That's Josh Prager. The whole Moby Dick thing is going to make sense very soon. But at this point in the story, he's in a rented car, having returned to Israel after a long absence.
So the whole Moby Dick theme was actually something that we had been playing with from the very beginning. We really wanted to do a Moby Dick themed show, something about revenge, something. And originally,
there you go. Moby Dick. Yeah. How many would be? I want to do Moby Dick.
But the hippo was originally slated for that. We thought this is perfect because the hippo guy that you guys heard before, the great part of the story is that he actually goes back after losing his arm, after the incident you heard, he actually goes back to the river and sees this beast again. So we thought this is the perfect Moby Dick story. But then when we got into studio, and he was going to be a 5-minute topper kind of thing, and we got into studio and he was so riveting that we realized that he basically deserved his own show. So that threw Moby Dick out the window. And he wasn't vengeful. He was so sweet and funny, and his family had called the hippo Harry. He was like a known character in the family. But Josh Prager, I spoke to him over the phone, and it turned out that he is actually obsessed with the book Moby Dick. Like, he's crazy about it. So there's no way that we weren't still going to do a Moby Dick story. So I guess the risk that we took in these stories and in doing them was actually let them speak and take the time to not slate things in and decide what they're going to be, what we're going to do with them, and what the crux of the story is going to be. And I think that actually is probably similar to what you're saying, but we took our time. And in the end, the Moby Dick story, it wasn't a story about revenge at all, because our main guy, this guy who goes to confront Abed, isn't Ahab. He's actually the guy who's along for the ride. He's Ishmael. And so, because we took the time to think about it, we, recorded it, talked about these stories over beers and other beers, and tried to tease out what that interesting bit was. And I think that's what helped us make the stories that we wanted to make, rather than go for sort of the obvious points.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I would just say that by any measure other than the finished product, hopefully, I'd go so far as to say we actually just had no idea what we were doing. It was, I mean, really, like, we would go in with with the plan for. We sat it on the first day of production. We mapped out all of our shows and all the stories that we thought would work, and then we kind of stuck them to a board, and we spent the whole summer moving everything around.
Oh, crazy with scissors, and it was super crowded.
Yeah, nothing went according to plan, like literally nothing. But the great thing about that is that you're constantly surprised by what you do. But we also threw out tons of stuff. I mean, we would go on drives to Niagara Falls to tape this documentary thing, and just decide that it was we'd spend a whole day doing something that wouldn't work. But conversely, we'd book a single interview that was supposed to be super short, and it would turn into a whole show. And I think it would probably lose my job anywhere else in this building for doing that, but I couldn't fire myself. But it was great, because I think I think that's one of the things when you're making a new show, is that no matter what you, at least for us, no matter what we planned and no matter what you're sort of envisioning in your head, when you go to make it, it's going to sound different. And we really wanted to do something that sounded different. So that was kind of a painful process, but I think I think it's just you're starting with an idea, and you have to work with it. And it's program development. You're going to develop as you move along.
That's a perfect segue.